Two, one, and we're live. What's going on, my man? I'm here with Nicksick from Extreme Couture Gym, a trainer there, a coach there, Las Vegas. And hey, I'm so happy to have you here, man. How are you living?
Doing well, man. I appreciate you having me on.
So how have you been, man? Like, how's your gym been? How's the training situation been in COVID? Like, how do you adapt to this?
We're slammed. We've been busy. We never really stopped training. When COVID hit, it just got different in ways, and we had to work our way around it. And of course, like to me, that's the really the main aspect of fighting is learn and overcome and adapt. So that was just something we adapted to, what we had to do for Francis, and then Danny Ige and Claudia Gadelia. They were our first ones out to shoot in Jacksonville. So we just, once we kind of understood the way the process is going to be, we took that, and then we were able to adapt our training sessions.
Yeah, I mean, you guys look great in the fights, first of all. And it seems like the training situation is really good at that gym because, I mean, you see some guys that are a little bit undertrained. They had some issues finding camps or whatever, finding trainers. But your guys seem to have great conditioning, great power. They look like their normal selves. What do you guys do to keep up with this? Like, how do you maintain the gym to make sure that there isn't a case or something wrong that could happen?
Well, I appreciate the compliment. And I think that a lot of that begins with our standard and our mindset of who we are as mixed martial artists, especially when it comes through our facility. And that kind of starts from the top with Randy Couture and his pedigree, and the way that we were brought up as coaches was, we don't try to win fights. We don't try to eke out wins or victories. We try to demoralize people. We want to win in a fashion that where they understand that it just wasn't by the skin of our teeth that we put an ass whooping on somebody. And where does that start? It really starts with the training and the conditioning in the gym. So like my practice today on Mondays are very hard, man. And it's probably one of the most popular classes that we have in the gym. I almost had about 45, 50 people. Aljamain Sterling was in, Marab, who just fought on Saturday. Like guys who just fought in the UFC or that are training, and they come into town, they try to hit that Monday practice. And I think it just hits differently because it's a pace, man. And we're trying to break ourselves to a point where we know that in a fight, that opponent won't be able to keep up with what we're gonna have for them. So to me, it's more of a culture thing.
I love the attitude. I really love the attitude. And what I really like about your mindset as a coach is that you're very willing to bring in people from other gyms, right? To help train with your guys. And I know you're big on that. I mean, I feel like that's a very positive mentality to have, especially in this day and age as a coach. But how do you think that compares to a tight knit group, like a closed circle? Like, how do you think these two compare to each other?
It can be good and it could be bad in a lot of senses. Like, and I went around and I kind of just talked to my veterans in the gym, like the Gray Maynards and the Martin Cammons, and the people that really I value their opinions, and I kind of wanted to know their thoughts on, hey, what do you guys think about having kind of an open door policy? And some guys are good with it and some guys aren't, because you might have a guy like I'll use Misha Serkinov for example. Like, he's part of our team. He's a 205er, and maybe Johnny Walker called and wants to come in and train. Well, he was a former opponent of Misha's, but I always like to try to go and reach out and talk to that fighter and say like, hey, are you okay with this guy coming in, and almost test the waters. And most of the times, 90% of the time, most of the guys will say, no, I have no problem with that at all. And if a guy does have a problem and he doesn't want another guy there because he's in his weight class and it might be a future opponent or a future matchup, then I'll take it for what it's worth on that end, and speak to the fighter and say, hey man, our guy doesn't feel comfortable with you in the gym right now, and it's just almost your approach. So it can be difficult. For me, I'm more on the side of, I love having guests in the gym. I love having people in town. But it also can be a downfall too if you allow too much of that.
Yeah, for sure. I know you love that the camaraderie aspect of the gym because you came from a football background, right? And this is what really attracted you to being a coach at an MMA gym. So, like, tell me about that, man. Like, tell me how this all worked out. How it went from football to MMA.
Well, I mean, thank you, and that means a lot, because it was really why I found MMA. Was I was missing something in my life when I was done with football, and yes, you miss the sport, you miss the competition, you miss all those things, you miss playing, but what you really miss the most is the camaraderie. You miss the team, you miss working together to achieve a common goal, and I felt like MMA had a little bit of that. I did, but I didn't feel like it had the same sort of mindset we did in football, because MMA is an individual sport once the cage door closes. But what I would try to bring was, you're only as good as the team that you surround yourself with to get you to that point. So that was kind of the thought I felt that I could bring from football over into MMA, and why I feel like some of my thoughts and my ideologies are successful, because it's about looking over the person next to you, and that makes you who you are just as good. If you're training with a bunch of dogs that aren't doing anything very well, then that's probably what you're going to be doing yourself, is you're going to lower yourself to that standard. But if you set a precedence and you surround yourself with championship mindset people, I'll tell you what, man, the sky's the limit.
How do you establish that in your gym? Like, what are your kind of protocols? Like, how do you make sure that this is the case at all times in, tough environments like today, or even when everybody's kind of cruising, like before this whole thing happened? How do you establish this?
Man, it starts with me, and it starts with Coach Dennis. It starts with Nate. It starts with Ray Sefo. It starts with all the coaches in the gym. If we don't follow that standard, like Coach Eddie as well, like if we don't follow that standard as coaches, then no one's going to believe the bullshit then, right? So if we're showing up late, if we're showing up unprepared, if we're not doing the things we're supposed to be doing at home, in our community, in the gym, all those things that you try to preach, if you're not doing it, then no one's going to buy into it either. So it's important for me all the way down to today, when after class is over, we have to clean the mats. We're in the middle of COVID. I grab the mop bucket. I grab the mop. I grab the sprayer. I start spraying it down, because look, I can delegate that. I can go tell anybody to go do the mats. But when your head coach is the one that's doing it, usually what it does is inspires others to follow that suit. So what happened? A bunch of guys ran over and grabbed the mop and grabbed the broom and grabbed everything out of my hands and did it themselves, right? So for me, I would rather lead from, I wouldn't say from the front, but if I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing as a leader, I think it follows suit for the rest of the team.
100%, 100%. And I know, you're the gym manager, you're the coach, trainer and everything. What other roles do you take on? Are you the nutrition guy, or do you oversee nutrition?
No, I really don't mess with the nutrition, man. I just eat. I eat a lot of food, and I'm a big old Viking. So, man, I usually eat 2 meals every time I sit down. If we go to breakfast, I'm ordering like biscuits and gravy and then pancakes. So I should not be your nutrition guy at all. But I do have very good people that handle that. One of them is Dan Ige's wife, is Savannah Ige. She handles I actually send a lot of my fighters to her, as well as the UFC PI with Clint Waterberg, and then Bo Sandoval and Heather Linden. Like, they handle a lot of their stuff too. And there's some very great guys outside of that handle that stuff. So for me personally, being the head coach, it's important for me to help oversee that stuff and checks and balances and check in on that stuff. But when it comes to micros and macros and, carbs and all that stuff, man, not for me. I'm like, yo, I'll eat all the stuff you can. Just send it my way.
That's respect, man. I respect that big time. So, but you do look over strength and conditioning aspect of it and all of that. I'm very curious to know, how does a guy like Francis Ngannou end up in your gym? Like, what is the story behind this like monster that kind of ends up in your gym at like a specimen almost? Like, how does
Well,
that work?
he moved to Vegas. He moved to Vegas a few years ago, and he came into the gym more over for the bodies. So he had all of his coaches that he still used out in France. And you know what? For me, I never really want to try and like force myself, or I don't want to coach a guy unless it becomes organic, if that makes sense. So you see a guy like Francis, I think a lot of people in the beginning want to just like, oh, it's Francis Ngannou. I have to show him everything I have. I have to jump on this. And it wasn't like that for me and him. And there was actually a time when his manager called me and said, I'm really good friends with his manager. He said, hey, what do you think about or starting to coach Francis? And I told him, I said, look, man, I'd love to, but I really haven't been able to connect with him yet on a personal level. And I think that's important, because if we don't have that bond as coach and fighter, I think it's hard when you get into a tough spot, or you're on the stool and you're down a round or two and you got to fucking dig out of something deep, that it's just not just a guy talking to you. It's somebody that you trust and somebody that you believe in, that this guy has my back wholeheartedly. So I started helping him in the Curtis Blades fight. Didn't corner him. I started helping him again. I think the Cain Velasquez camp, we were there for it, but I wasn't in the corner. And then the Junior Dos Santos fight, he asked me to be in the corner. And then, of course, asked me to be his head coach for the Jairzinho fight. So for me, man, it became very organic. And, you know, now he's part of my family. My kids love him. My wife loves him. He's over at the house once a week. We FaceTime all the time. He's in Africa right now. And that's what eventually you hope for in any athlete that you have, that it's a brotherhood, man. It's a friendship first, and then it's a coach, and you have to be able to kind of draw those lines when you need to. But I really love the dynamic that Francis and I have, and it was just really over time.
That's integrity, man. That's integrity. I feel like you really got that down. The integrity aspect of it. You're not gonna force something if it's not organic. And
Correct.
especially with a guy like Ngannou, I mean, he has almost like all the excuses to like be lazy. He's like, I could just hit him with one shot and he'll go out. How is it keeping him motivated, keeping him grinding, even though he knows it just takes one shot?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. It was the humbling experience of being beat by Stipe Miocic that changed his tune. And I think that was his biggest downfall in that fight. And not only do I think that, he'll tell you that. He'll tell you, hey, man, I wasn't doing all the right things. And we had a very interesting conversation after the Junior Dos Santos fight. We sat down and we had a nice dinner, just me and him. And we start delving into some of your insecurities, right? And I call them your boogeyman. Like what lives underneath your bed that you're afraid of shit to look at, right? And a lot of times what we do, myself included, in life is we tend not to look under the bed and face those fears. But once you do face those fears, what happens to that boogeyman is it becomes your best ally, right?
Mm.
And all of a sudden you change that thing to your weakness becomes your what? Your biggest strength. And now there ain't no fucking boogeyman anymore, right? Now you become the boogeyman. So if you can identify those things that you're afraid of and identify the things that make you vulnerable and make you not want to do things. So what you see in MMA quite a bit is people tend to double down on their strengths. Really good strikers only want to hit pads, right? They only want to hit pads. And they only want to look pretty on the pads. And then what are we going to do? We're going to spar. We're going to hit pads, right? And maybe their game elevates minuscule over the years. But if you tell that same striker that, hey, man, I feel like you can improve your game leaps and bounds in 1 year if you just focus a little bit more on your wrestling or your grappling or that boogeyman that we talk about, then what happens to your game? It flips. So instead of gaining just a little bit, your game jumps exponentially because why? You double down on that weakness, right? Let's say if you use it by a number, maybe it's a 20. Now your rating on the UFC games now an 80, right? So you start to jump those ratings because you put the work in an area that you didn't feel very comfortable in. You felt kind of vulnerable. And that's just life, man. We got to start pointing out those boogeymen and look at that fucker in the face.
So this boogeyman that you talk about, do you think it's like a thing of, because I think you're talking about his wrestling. Honestly, that's what I think. Because Stipe kind of got him with the wrestling,
Right.
but it's also a conditioning thing, right? Because he had to kind of look it in the face in that fight. So with that, did you after that fight, did you how much was it a physical like training change as compared to a mental change?
Well, it wasn't the wrestling okay, so the wrestling is part of it. But here's the thing, when you dig down to the root of it, it was the wrestling conditioning. So you're
Yeah.
right. It was the cardio, right? So that's the thing too. And you can never really go and ask for the answer to a problem and not try to have a solution, right? So I already knew the answer to the problem. I just wanted to hear him say it. And he did. He said, hey, here's where I think I need to be better at, which tells you two things. One, he's willing to work at it, right? Because he's being vulnerable. And number two, it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, here's how I think we can correct it. Are you on board? And he said, man, I want to be a champion and I'm going to do whatever the fuck it takes. And here we are. Here we are. So I can talk to I'm blue in the face about it. And a lot of people still won't believe it to this day because we won 4 fights in a row in the first round. But I'm telling you, he's doing all the things he's supposed to do behind the scenes that are going to surprise a lot of people.
That's it, man. I mean, that's one of the toughest things to overcome in your career, right? Like looking your insecurity right in the face and flipping it, you know? And
You got to
I
do it every day.
100%. And I think that, the next time he fights Stipe, which I think is next, honestly, I think that's next. I think it's going to be a little bit of a different fight because of the manner in which he lost in the first fight. Because it wasn't like he just got knocked out or something early. It wasn't like that. It was like an actual, like you could see on his face, like, okay, I need to change something. You could tell that he needs to either change or he's not going to make it in the sport. And he clearly changed, right? So
100%.
yeah, so I'm thinking though, like as a trainer, and I know that you're not really on the nutrition aspect of it, as you said before, but I always thought that a guy like Ngannou, who's so big, right? The more muscle, the more oxygen it takes for your body, the quicker you get tired. But if you
Hmm.
were to take some weight off of that guy, I mean, I feel like he still have his power, right? Is that something that you
Oh,
considered? Yeah.
yeah. So that's actually something that we do. So Kyle Laramie is his strength and conditioning coach over the PI. And because of the coronavirus, myself and Francis did all of our workouts at the gym at Extreme Couture. So Kyle Laramie would give me the workouts, and then we would go over all the stuff over at Extreme Couture. The great thing about the UFC PI and their strength and conditioning staff is we sit down as a team and we go over our game plan and what we want to do in the fight and what my expectations are for my fighter, what my fighter's expectations are about of the coaches. So everything's up front. So nothing takes precedence over anybody else, right? We're all kind of get out where we need to be. But if I went to the guys and said, "Hey man, I need to get Francis down. Here's what I want goal wise." That's what the PI does, man. They do a great job of listening to the coaches. You see a lot of times where strength and conditioning coaches overtake a lot of the camp where they don't understand what I need my guy to be fresh for a practice later on today, and he comes in dog tired because the strength and
Mm,
conditioning coach kicked his ass, right? And that's not what I want. It's like, hey man, I need my guy to be ready to go for grappling. You kind of overtook it. What's more important? So I always talk to the guy when we sit down and we do our camp and we do our write out for our schedule is if you grade each thing on your schedule and give it a score of a 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. So if you have 2-a-days, each thing should have a score to it. So 5 should be maybe your pro practice that day. It has the most value. Your 1 might be a morning run, right? Or a yoga class or whatever it may be. That might be your 1. And if there's a 1 in there, that should be the thing that gets crossed out or changed up for because it doesn't have that much value or purpose, right? So you always want to weigh out what your schedule looks like and what needs to take precedence. And sometimes during that day, the strength and conditioning does, and that should hold precedence to that day. And then later on in the night, maybe your pro practice is only drills or more of a lighter load. So that's what we went and did with Francis. And we actually had Francis at 255 before we got canceled. So the weight that we agreed on that we wanted to be was more light and more athletic. And we did that. We were 255. Then we got canceled. Then we got rebooked. Then we got canceled. Then we got rebooked again. And of course, there was an extra 10 pounds that came along. So I think we stepped on the scale. It might have been 260, I believe. I have to look at it. But that was the whole goal, was to be at 255.
So in doing so, did you do something like you're talking about priority, but did you do something like you put your pro practice before your strength and conditioning instead? Because I know, like Floyd Mayweather's talked about this, for example. He said, I do my running in the middle of the night. I don't do it before my training, my boxing, because I'm gonna be tired in boxing, and that's the priority. And you could even look at it like if a guy who's working out right at the gym, they say don't do your cardio before you lift weights or do your pull-ups or whatever, because if you do cardio before that and go at least expend some of your energy, you're going to do less in the gym. If that's your goal, getting stronger or bigger, then you're just kind of eating away from it. You're making it difficult on yourself. So did you guys kind of I know he didn't really use a lot of skill in that Rosenstrike fight. I mean, he just kind of went in and put his lights out, but did you guys focus more on the pro practice before the strength and conditioning, like actually put it earlier in the day?
So the way we set it up was we were doing 11 a.m.s, S&Cs, and then at night we had some skill building because of COVID. And then we would always set, just how you're saying, we would set his sparring up in the morning. So 11 a.m. across the board, we were doing something hard in the mornings. And then at night, we were doing some other extracurricular stuff. So like just the same blueprint you're saying, we would spar on a Tuesday and Thursday. And then at night, we would come back and do some skill building. And then on Mondays and Wednesdays, we would do our strength and conditioning in the morning at 11 a.m. and then skill build at night. So it was always kind of like the precedence would always happen in the mornings and get it out of the way. And then the skill building or strength and conditioning would happen at night or flip flop. So whatever took precedence would happen in the morning. And it was actually a blueprint that we did get from Floyd Mayweather. Same exact thing. So we always see Floyd all the time. You see him spar or train or do some stuff. And then he would do it at his road work or his S&C right after the sparring.
Yeah, and I mean, for those of you guys that don't know Francis Ngannou, he's jacked. So that's why he's a little bit of a different case. And that's why I ask, I mean, does he do weightlifting? Because I know it's taboo in like MMA or is it just genetics?
It's certainly genetics for one. He'll tell you this too. Like we were lifting more like football style during COVID, and like we're all doing bench and dumbbells, and all the boys are in the gym. It was like a weight room for football, like the whole time during COVID. And he can't really do a lot of that. I mean, he can do it. It's just his technique isn't very good. He's trying to do incline, and his arms are all over the place. So he's like a big old puppy, you know. And then he can squat, he can power clean. He's strong as all can be, as you can imagine. But that wasn't the goal for us. Our goal was more MMA cardio. So where I was doing more chaos rounds is what we call them. We do them on Saturdays is our Sicko Saturdays chaos rounds where we emulate fights. So it's up down training, it's bench training, it's ground and pound, it's pads, it's everything you can imagine all mixed in to a 5-minute round for 5 minutes or for 25 minutes because we had the 5-round main event, which which we were scheduled for. So that's what held precedence usually out throughout the week was the MMA cardio rounds. And that's what we wanted to make sure we leaned heavy on because that's what the boogeyman was.
Yeah, I was talking to Zach Otto. I don't know if you know him or not.
Yep. Yep.
He's head
Milwaukee.
coach. Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. And he has similar strategies to you. He thinks the same way. And he thinks we were discussing people who like say I train 6 hours a day every day and for my training camp. And it's like ridiculous, right? But he said, just like kind of the way you were saying, is that a fight is a sprint. It's not a long distance thing, right? So 25-minute fight or 15-minute fight, you go hard for like half an hour, right? And you could do it like 2 times a day, right? You go really hard for half an hour, kind of like to emulate a fight. And that could get you prepared rather than going, super long, like hours and hours in a day because you don't recover properly. You agree with that? That's what you
Oh,
think?
1,000,000%. And it's just exactly what he's saying. Like you practice how you play how you practice, right? Like if you're doing this and you're doing it at like a snail's pace marathon run, it's just not it. And furthermore, like I can't train guys like we did in football because we have a play in between or a huddle in between or rest in between, right? Depending on your offense that you're in. But of course, like if you train for that 25 minutes, that 15 minutes, and it's like a car crash and it's coming at you, and you're prepared for every little thing possible. Up down training is the biggest thing that I think break guys is that wrestling grind of up down. You got taken down. Can you get back up? Can you get back down? Can you get back up? Can you do it over and over and over again? And you start watching Kobe Covington. You watch Kamaru Usman. You watch Khabib. Guys like that. They can do that for days and never get tired, right? So where's the cutting edge and where all the guys are holding belts? They're able to do that. So what does the game tell you? Where you need to evolve is your MMA cardio.
Yeah, and your strength and conditioning or to get better cardio in general, you guys do a lot of plyometrics workouts, a lot of
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, a
like
ton of
what
plyos, explosive plyometrics, things of that sort. Even with the trap bar and sprints and band sprints, we have those sand dunes, little like they're like
ooh.
almost like running in sand stuff, and whatever medieval things we can think of, we can come up with. We'll do, or we'll talk to the guys over the PI and figure out what they're thinking, and they have all the equipment, all the cutting edge stuff over there too. So I call them weapons of mass destruction, man. We just go in there and just get after it.
Yeah, I love that, man. Um, man, I think we lost you for a second, bro.
Uh,
Can you hear me? Oh, it's good.
yeah, got you.
All right,
Yep.
yeah. So, also, what was I gonna ask? Oh, yeah. How, as a coach, do you decide or establish how to make somebody efficient in certain areas? Is it just grind and practice? Because I know that that's honestly the key to cardio. If you work in the places where you are efficient, right? Like if a wrestler tries to stand, even though he has great cardio, he might gas out trying to stand, and vice versa. How do you establish that? Is it just grind or is it technique? Like, what do you think that is?
I think it's all of the above, right? I think it's all of the above, and really, really being honest and accountable to what you think some of the breaking it down essentially, right? Where are you having the problems? Where am I having issues? And then identifying those issues and then finding the right path to capitalize on those issues, right? So yes, it could be cardio, it could be technique, it could be all of the above. And then looking at it and going, okay, well, how do we fix it? What's the right approach to that? And then identifying and then finding the right path to change.
Yeah, for sure. People don't really understand how, man, it's 25 minutes. How is he getting tired? Like, they don't understand it, but it is so taxing on your body, going 2 rounds, 2 hard rounds, and you could be done. But one important aspect that I read a lot about is breathing. And as a
Mm.
coach, how do you emphasize the proper breathing? Because I don't care how fit somebody is. If they're not breathing properly, they will gas out. It is what it is. So, Francis got tired in that fight with Stipe. Guys who you work with, I'm sure, get tired in the gym. What kind of corrections do you make with their breathing that actually helps them? Because it makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. And because I'm not an expert in any of those fields, but I have guys that do work on that stuff, and Dan Ige being one of them. Dan Ige every morning does these breathing exercises, right? And as his coach, I see him doing it, especially when you're on the road and you're traveling. Hey, what are you doing there? Oh, this is this or this is that. Where'd you find that from? Or this or this, that. So then what you do is you bring Dan Ige in, and after a pro practice, you say, hey, Dan, run the guys through 15 minutes of what you're showing me, right? And give the floor to other people too. Just because you're the coach of the gym doesn't mean you can't be coached. So it's very important to kind of give the floor to guys that might be on something different. Gray Maynard used to bring in the HRV and the heart rate variabilities, all these other little things that I didn't know about, but it's about expanding your knowledge and understanding that there's new things out there that you might not be in touch with, and trying to learn from the guys and other coaches and other camps might be doing something different too. So for me, it's very important to kind of ask questions and understand that stuff, where Dan does it quite a bit. And I know it helps him a ton, especially when you get on the stool. We kind of go over a ritual, same breathing techniques that he has since, 10 fights in, and he's kind of dialed it in. So for me, I don't know much about that stuff, but because Dan and I work with it, now I start to understand more. And you're absolutely right. It's very important, especially when you only have that 1 minute to recover.
Yeah, especially guys with like broken noses. They can
Oh
only breathe
yeah.
from their mouth. Man, they get
Yeah.
tired, and it's concerning, especially, or even if the guy's nose isn't broken, if his mouth is wide open, he's just exhausted. You know what's gonna happen. You know he's gonna get tired,
Yeah,
right?
and how the round went, right? How'd the
Oh
round
yeah.
go, right? Would you get dropped, or did you almost finish the guy? You're dealing with a lot of emotions, and at the time, obviously the crowd and everything else. And hey, man, just take a minute. Let's get calmed down. And that's usually why you see most coaches work on the breathing in the first 15, 20 seconds of the cornering, right? Hey, grab a seat. It's all about the delivery, slowing your speech down, right? Talk slow. And if I talk slow, the guy feels like he's breathing,
Mm.
right? Sometimes I don't say anything. I just do this. I breathe myself. You looking at me, you see me breathe. What do? You breathe,
Mm.
right? So a lot of that stuff is really just kind of the feel and the vibe of the coach and the fighter, and calm, precise, get the point across, get him breathing, get him ready to go.
Oh yeah, and the most important aspect of training is recovery, right? So, what's your philosophy on recovery? How exactly do you get these guys to beat their bodies up in training and then come home, rest up, and be ready the next day or the day after?
Well, I'm old school, so I'm an ice bath idiot. I've always, for some reason, why I always felt like ice baths were just the cure to everything, and really it does. And I feel good after an ice bath. I know that there's been studies on, it coagulates the blood or slows this down or whatever. To me, if you really boil down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's a mental game. It's cold, it sucks, you
Yeah.
hate it, right? And I don't care about any other thing other than me conquering the goal of being stuck in the ice for 12 to 15 minutes. And you get out, it's another victory for the day, right? And for some reason why, maybe it's a placebo, maybe I'm crazy, but I feel pretty damn good when I get done, knowing that I accomplished that goal and tackled that task for the day. But, I'm big on rest. I'm big on communication with your coaches. It's important not to run guys into the dirt because especially during a pandemic and you got to stay healthy, right? You can get guys sick and you don't want that outcome right now. You want to make sure you guys are staying healthy out here. In Vegas, especially, man, it's hot. It's super hot. Gym today was cooking. Hey, I don't give a lot of water breaks, so make sure you guys get your water in and make sure you guys get your water after. Big on trace minerals, big on Himalayan sea salt, help with the cramps, help with replenishing. And I like a lot of the stuff that HRV is doing with the apps and the Whoop and all those other stuff, kind of telling your body where it's at and your rest and your sleep cycles and when to rest and things like that. It's very important to listen to your bodies, man. So for me, constant communication with your fighters and kind of tinkering the way you see fit.
You're so right about the ice baths. Like you hear the toughest guys in the sport still talking about, hey, I take ice baths. I don't do cryo. It's a different world taking an ice bath. It's like you
It's an
can't even
easy route.
imagine.
It's the
Oh
easy
yeah.
route, right?
Yeah.
It's the easy route, man. And there's something about filling up the tub. There's something about dreading getting in that thing. There's something about getting in it and then dropping the ice in on you, and that first shock of that oh man, it's cold, and really calming your brain, calming your mind, taking a deep breath and breathing your way through that 15 minutes or whatever, man. It could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 15. But for me, it has a sense of accomplishment once you get through that. And sometimes that's just the victory in itself.
What about saunas? Like, what's your opinion on that? Do you put your fighters in the sauna?
It depends if we're cutting weight or not, and it depends on the fighter and how they cut. Brad Tavares, he'll do an hour-long hot bath and we're on weight. People can't do the same thing Brad does. I tell you what, people hate the hot bath. Some people love the sauna. Jessica I has a sauna that gets up to 190 degrees, and I think that's way
Ooh,
too hot. And there's no
that's
reason
crazy.
to cook yourself that you're just cooking yourself. So really, man, I think it's depicted on the person, and depending on what you want to do. Are they doing sauna for recovery? Are they doing it for cutting weight? Is it infrared? All those things. We have a nice infrared sauna at the gym, and I love using it. I feel like when I sweat in that thing, like with my palms, especially my hands, I feel like it has like a kind of clamminess to them when you sweat like in that sauna. And I feel really good after there as well.
Yeah, so I meant actually for recovery, not really cutting weight, but yeah, infrared. Like, what is so good about that infrared sauna? Because like, I've been in an infrared sauna before. I go regularly to an infrared sauna. Like, yeah, that when your hands start sweating and everything, then you know you're in deep. So, what is that like? What is the like? Do you know like what the health aspect to it, what the benefit is to recovery?
Well, from my understanding, the infrared's supposed to penetrate and almost like I won't say cook you, but make you sweat from like through the inside. Whereas like the regular hot rock sauna is like kind of cooking you from the
Yeah.
outside, right? Like it's
Oh yeah.
cooking your skin, it's cooking your head, and I had the infrared and I've cut weight in there a couple times with my guys, and we don't feel like it's hot enough. You're like, oh, this isn't hot enough. But then you get done and you're out and you're like, man, I just lost 4 pounds. So it's doing its job, but you're also not cooking yourself. So why would you want to do something too excessive, especially when it comes to a weight cut, when one little mental break could ultimately sway the whole weight cut, right? So
Mm,
it's like you want to be as comfortable as possible. That's why I always suggest to do the infrared and do it at like at 140 where it's
yeah.
bearable. It gets hot and you're sweating. That's all you need to do in a weight cut is get hot and sweat. I don't care how you do it, just get hot and get sweating. So yeah, for me, I prefer the infrared over the regular sauna. I actually have one here at the house. I just sit in that thing where your head pops out of it, and I try to do it like a couple times a week just to sweat. So I enjoy those.
Is the zipper one like the one where you kind of zip up?
Yeah,
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 that's the
it's a
way to
zipper
go.
one. Yep, yep.
Yeah. What about massages? Like, do you have your guys like, go through like deep, heavy massages throughout the week after training or during training? How does that go for you?
Um, Again, depends on the guy, but I'm big on that stuff. Francis uses one of our ladies that comes to the gym. Her name's Jean. She's like, I don't know, like 5'2" and a little skinny little thing. She's probably the strongest person I've ever met in my life, man. But that woman hurts people, bro. And Jean will get in there and work on people. We have Dr. Bo Hightower from the
Oh
YouTube
yeah.
fame. His office is in. He has two guys, Dr. Carlos and Dr. Sean, that have offices in Extreme Couture. They see our fighters for us, and it's great having those guys on hand. So big time fan of massage, ART, getting that training in, and then getting in and getting fixed up, dry needling. They do it all, and I think it's very important. It's nice having those guys in the gym, so it's kind of turns into a one-stop shop.
Yeah, I think it's probably also a mental thing. Like, man, I'm keeping track. I'm keeping my body in such good shape, doing all these extra little things. Like, I should be ready for this fight, right? That's probably
Oh,
how it is.
100%. Yeah, and it's really like the NFL and all the pro sports have paved the way, and now the UFC with the UFC PI, and Dr. Heather Linden over there. Like I go see Dr. Linden all the time. She works on my arm, my shoulder from holding pads for such of those big guys. And man, like you're reinvesting back into your own career by taking care of your body and going to see those guys and girls and getting the therapy done that you need.
Yeah, man. Is your rotator cuff okay from having Francis hitting those pads? Like, is it intact?
Uh, yeah, it's in there, but it's constantly it's scapular problems and shoulder problems. So that's gonna be it till I'm done, till I retire. So yeah, it's gonna be a long haul.
That's crazy. That's respect, though. But how do you think? I want to hear from the coach. How's it gonna go the second time, Stipe versus Ngannou? How do you see this fight going?
Well, man, I'm not a big talker on a lot of those things, and I'm always telling my guys like, hey, don't tell me, show me. I can sit here and tell you a million ways and this, and that. The fact of the matter is Stipe Miocic is the baddest man on the planet. I've known Stipe a long time. I've known his coaches for a long time. They're unbelievable at what they do. There's a reason why Stipe is a champion. Is because he has that mindset, but he also has the coaches to back it up. So it's going to be very important for us to sit down and really map out a good game plan. It's not like, and this is per Francis, he felt he was just going to go in there in the first fight and just knock this guy out and be done and be champ, right? And that's not the case anymore at this level, especially with a guy like Miocic. So it's going to be important for us to find multiple paths to victory, put together a smart game plan, and execute those game plans as we go out throughout the fight, because you know what? Those guys are going to change on us as well. So
Yeah.
you go to one path, that path changes because those guys make the adjustment. So you have to adjust to the adjustment, and it's going to be a chess match. And that's how we have to approach this fight. It's just not going to be walk in there and try to knock this guy out.
Hey, man. I'm so happy you got to talk to you. I learned so much today. I hope the viewers learned so much today. It was really a pleasure, man. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate having me on, man. Thanks for hitting me up.
All right, hopefully you can come on again. And that's it for today, folks. Appreciate you guys watching. Peace.